The Friends of the Withlacoochee Gulf Preserve in Yankeetown, Florida presents another speaker in its mission to promote conservation, preservation, and continuing education for all ages.
Good morning. My name is Dale Buffenmeyer. I own Custom Bird Works of Florida here in Yankeetown. It's right across from the town hall. It's in the old Yankeetown garage. I've been there since 2006. Tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I always enjoyed hunting and fishing. And it's kind of how I got into taxidermy, probably when I was 16, just through hunting and fishing. Back then, when you were interested in taxidermy, you got a correspondence course. There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't all the things there are today. You basically got these pamphlets, and ironically, they start you out on birds and they start you out on pigeons. And pigeons are one of the hardest birds to mount, where they're very brittle. It was very challenging, but I was 16 years old, so I did it. Set up a little shop, and I would skin birds and things like that, and I was very interested in. Fortunately, another taxidermist invited me to go to a taxidermy convention down in North Carolina. I ended up, I learned more in, where there's seminars and all that, and I learned more in 3 days than I've learned in the past 3 years messing around on my own. So they actually had a taxidermy school. It was called Piedmont Technical College in Roxborough, North Carolina, which is now a community college, just like Santa Fe Community College. I had a taxidermy program. So when I graduated high school, I went there for a whole year and got enrolled in their taxidermy program. And it was good. Anytime, if you take a whole year of your life and dedicate it towards something and you're young, well, you can do it when you're old, but when you're young, you're more apt to learn about it. And I did that, and after I graduated school there, they had two programs, certificate and a diploma, where you took other classes in the college also. I got a diploma, and then I went to work for a man out in Lawrenceville, Georgia, outside Atlanta, and he had a big taxidermy shop, and I went to work there for him for a year. I went to school with a guy that lived in Keystone Heights, and I used to come down to Florida periodically and hunt with him and that sort of thing, and then I ended up meeting, I ended up working for Tony's Taxidermy over in Hawthorne. And I got hired as a bird taxidermist there, and I did, for 10 years I worked there full time as a bird taxidermist, and I did all the finish painting, I did all the fake rocks and all that stuff, and we did safari work. It was a pretty big shop. I left there, I ended up going out on my own a little bit. I did wholesale birds for other taxidermists for a couple years, and then I went back to college in my 30s. And then I ended up getting on full-time with the sheriff's office with Alachua County. So I first started out with reserve. My intention was not to be a deputy sheriff. My intention was to do that on the side and just do taxidermy full-time, because I already did it for 13 years full-time. And I decided, due to the, I had children and the benefits and so forth and so on. So I ended up going full-time with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office. I did 22 years with them. I was a detective for 12 years during that time with Alachua County. And for about 8 years out of 12, I did nothing but dead bodies and robberies. Pretty much that's what I did for the sheriff's office. And I did property crimes too for about 4 years. And then I ended up in civil serving papers. And so I did 22 years, but I never left taxidermy. I always did taxidermy. I was part-time all those years. And I primarily just do birds at that point. And even today, I'm not a full-service taxidermy business. 99% of everything I do are just ducks, geese, turkeys, birds, any bird whatsoever. I'll do a few fish once in a while, but not too many. I try not to do too many. It's not I don't want to, it's just you get set up for things. And we'll go over some of this. And my purpose here today is just kind of educate you. If you have any questions along the way, just ask me a question. Not really, I'm not advertising. I really stay busy. I'm really a niche thing. I really, most of all, I don't advertise. I have a business card. and I'm full-time, and basically all my new customers come referrals from other taxidermists, because I've been doing mountain birds for 40 years, and through competitions and things, they know me, and I really don't, and I do birds for people as far away as Texas to the Carolinas to, I do a lot of birds for a lot of different people. People have big collections, and I just don't, it takes a lot, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So I stay really, really busy. So I'm not here to advertise on my services, but you're willing to stop in any time you want and look around. I have some interesting things at times. Enough with me, but as the industry, taxidermy, we don't embalm things. We don't, taxidermy, the word taxidermy is, dermy is skin, and taxi is movement of skin, so it's taxidermy. That's where it comes from. It's all dealing with skin. You're not gutting anything. Everything is being skinned. Everything is being, on birds, you're degreasing them. On animals, you may get things tanned. The industry has really changed, I'd say, in the last 40 years. At one time, the big advancements is probably urethane foam is a big advancement. All your deer heads and stuff, it's all urethane foam. It used to be paper, like a paper and mache. And there's a big advancement, plus all the reproduction parts now. There's a lot more reproduction parts that you can use if you choose to do so. And I'll go over some of that. There's competitions, there's conventions. We have a state organization, the Florida Taxidermy Association, which I've been a member of for 85. Going back, I'm sorry, I skipped over how I got to Florida. Let me go back over that. When I was in Georgia, I came down here, like I said, and I ended up getting hired over at Tony's Taxidermy in Hawthorne as a bird taxidermist, and that was in 1985. So I came here in 1985, and I did that for 10 years, and then went on my own a little bit, and then I ended up 22 years, and that was 4 years ago at the sheriff's office, and I retired about 4 years ago. So I'm back doing it full time again. So, but really I've been doing it since like 1982, 83 is when I went to school. So, it's not telling my age, but it's I've been doing this a long time. So I feel like I've been doing it a long time. And I'm supposed to be retired, which I'm not. And many of you probably feel the same way. You sort of retire, you end up working harder than when you worked. So that's how I feel about it. But that's inside my shop. And I first rented just half of it just for a place to work. And then the other side was a thrift store, as many of you probably knew. And then he left, and then I expanded into that. And it's just kind of like a big old man cave, really, But come in, and we do a little fly tying there, and I'd sell some other stuff. But primarily, I don't sell anything. I provide a service. You go duck hunting, turkey hunting. You bring me your duck, your bird, and then I provide a service for you. Every night, we can't sell. Migratory waterfowl are protected. You can't sell them. I could sell a chicken, a rooster. I could sell a quail or a turkey. It's a state bird, but I can't sell any, while I'm on that, I can't sell anything migratory, anything you can't sell a feather of, you can't sell in part of the nest, an egg, anything of that bird. So if you see them on eBay or see them for sale, unless they're hatchery raised, they could sell them, but a lot of people sell them, but they can't, they're legally not supposed to. So everything, so if I get 50% down a deposit when I take a bird in, but if they don't pick it up, which rare does that happen, I'm stuck with the bird. I can't sell it to anybody. So there is no, everybody thinks I'm selling things there, and I don't sell anything really, mostly nothing. Anyway, there are competitions. We have a great state association. We just had our competition in Gainesville this past February. At a convention, we only have about 70 members, in the state, which there's more taxidermists than that. But we have seminars, we bring judges in. I was a national judge for many, many years. I would go around and I would judge birds at regional shows and stuff like that. We do have regional shows. We have a National Taxidermy Association. There's a national show. I think this year it's in South Dakota. There's the World Show. The World Show alternates between US and over in Europe. Every year it goes back and forth in the World Taxidermy Show, which I've never actually gone to the World Show, and I've never gone to the National Show, but I've sent birds for competition. And back in the 80s, I got a 3rd place in Masters with a parrot, and I think I got 2nd place in professional in the National Show. So I'd like to get back and do that sometime. But so you have the competition. That's a bird that was in a competition, that ringneck. Competitions are good, and it's really helped the industry get better, and with products, and of course they have display vendors, and you have seminars. And how you learn is, reading in a book is one thing, but watching people, and that's how you learn. And nowadays, I said I started out with a pamphlet, and it was really challenging back then. I had taxidermists who wouldn't talk to you. It was a very protected situation. I went to one guy near me and I said, listen, I'll sweep your floor. I'm 16 years old. I'll do whatever you want me. You don't have to pay me $1. I just want to see if I like it. I'll sweep your floor, I'll clean, whatever you want me to do. And he's like, nah, get out of here, So it's a little different now, I think. But you have YouTube. There's so much out there that you can watch. And there aren't as many schools, I don't think, anymore. But really the best is still the old-fashioned of almost like getting an apprenticeship almost and coming in. But today's kids, taxidermy numbers, I think, for taxidermists, that was that toucan there was interesting. I did that last year, and just side note on that toucan, it died. The people paid $3,500 for that bird, and it died a month and a half later. And the wife said to the husband, she said, "Honey, we should have bought the other one for $5,500. Maybe it would have lived." And I'm like, so they didn't want to bury it, so they said, why don't we get it mounted? And I said, okay, because I don't do. That wasn't even really a pet. They have aviaries and different birds and stuff, but. It was, it came out real well. And I said, well, listen, you don't have to clean up after it. You don't have to feed it. At least you got something out of your $3,500, So there's another one. I'll do so-called pet parrots and that sort of thing. I'll do those, but generally I don't mess with pets at all. There are people that do, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But because birds are not, birds aren't like dogs. Birds aren't like cats. They do freeze dry some dogs and cats. Cats, one way they kind of look okay if they're curled up and sleeping and stuff. But generally, people would call you about, hey, what do you do? When I worked in a shop, we got calls probably once a week. And then you'd usually tell them, you'd say, hey, just put it in your freezer for a month. Put it in a plastic bag, put it in your freezer for a month. And they say, well, how can I do that? Well, if you can't do that, you need to go bury it. And I recommend you bury it and go adopt one from the shelter. That's what you need to do. How can in fact, I had a pharmacist, real quick, I got a lot of stories, but the pharmacist one time called me and she said, hey, will you write a certification letter saying that if we have a dead animal in my freezer, it's okay? Because she worked like for CVS or something, and she took her cat or dog to work with her dead, and put in the freezer at work, and she got fired. No kidding. And it's like, well, I'm not an expert on frozen, but honestly, nothing probably would transfer over in a freezer. It'd probably be fine. But I'm like, no, ma'am, I can't write you anything to say there's no germ. You're a pharmacist, I'm just a taxidermist. So, but she got fired over it, and I don't, be expected, I guess. But people are, with pets are very sensitive. Charge $325 to mount a duck, and that's the base price. And that's pretty much any duck. And then geese are more, and that sort of thing. Turkeys, I'm up to $9.75 on a turkey for a base price. Obviously, if you wanted a fancy base and all that, that's more money. And there's tax. I charge sales tax. So, the community gets a little bit out of the sales tax, the town of Yankeetown, I guess. But no, so you have sales tax. But yeah, everything it's getting tough for everybody. It's getting tough. It's hard to get eyes. It's hard. The eye companies from getting the glass from Germany has just been really, ever since COVID. I mean, it's like this in every industry. Getting supplies have tripled. Shipping has doubled. A lot of things have just really gone up, like just in your own lives, groceries and gas, right? So. But in the industry has come a long way, I think, in a lot of things. Competition, probably through the association, some of my best friends I've known for 35 years have been through the association, and you help each other out, but there's not that many new people. There are some new people getting into taxidermy, but what happens is they do the math, and they think, oh boy, if I do, a deer head $600, people charge $600 for a deer head. If I do one a month or two, that's $1,200 income. Well, it doesn't work out like that in business. And then they find out, this is a lot of work. And most people, and a lot of kids today, sad to say, they're not really into working real hard. And especially if an industry where you have to put so many years of learning and so many years, I won't say apprenticeship, but it takes a lot. And that's a customer of mine in Gainesville. That's 30 years of doing ducks for them. That's 30 years of doing ducks for them. I have quite a few customers like that. I have one or two customers. It's just unbelievable. They'll do flocks of ducks. And I have like 3 customers that probably keep me busy all the time. They just travel and they just love it. One guy is putting everything into storage because then he's going to build probably a building like this and have a museum. And eventually, they travel around, and some people are into, whether you agree with it or not, they're into we have roughly 41, 42 species of waterfowl in the United States. So they want to collect each specimen for their collection. So, they do the same with turkeys. We have like the Grand Slam of turkeys. So you kill Rio Grande, you kill Merriam's, you kill Osceolas. Turkey hunting in Florida is really big, and then the Eastern, so you get the Grand Slam there.
What do they do with all of them?
Well, they have their. He's going to have it at his business where then he takes customers through this museum. And. I mean, people duck hunt to eat ducks. I mean, obviously. I mean, it's like anything, it's a lot. But these are just people that, obviously they have money to spend money and travel. And taxidermy is really, I've always considered taxidermy, it's icing on the cake. It's not necessary. Some people go for that purpose to get stuff collected. But I do half the turkeys I do are killed by kids. And it's their first bird. It's amazing, and it's always, it's an experience. You go, and some of it, you got to know your customers. Some of it is sentimental, because I'm going to get this duck mounted because me and Uncle Joe, it was our last duck hunt together. We hunted together for 20 years, and now he's done. He died, so I want to get this duck mounted. And then you have other ones that, I just want a good representation. I've been duck hunting for 20 years, and I just never got a nice wood duck mounted. Now I want to get a wood duck mounted. So you got to know your customers and know, how they think. Because if you bring me a bird and it's no good, it has a lot of pin feathers, it's young, it's not very mature, I'll tell you, or they'll bring 2 or 3 and say, pick the best one. Maybe all 3 are not worth it. I want you to be happy. And getting a really good mature specimen is very important. It's very important. It makes the whole job a lot easier for me, and it makes them happy too. So I'll just say, you need to get a better one next year, or go get a better one or something like that. Like I said, taxidermy's gone a long way through our competitions, through our just supplies and materials have gotten a lot better, and yet I think there's less good taxidermists around than there used to be. But then again, some people just want something hanging up on the wall. They don't care if it's not very good. They don't want to pay a lot of money for it. Other people, they want the best of the best. It just depends on who you are, and you got to know your customer base. Moving on. Basically, in taxidermy, we have different categories of taxidermy. Like I said, I'm not a full-service shop. I just do birds. I'm very specialized in what I do. I didn't bring a deer head today. There are deer heads in my shop that other people have mounted. I haven't mounted a deer head in 30 years. And there's no reason particularly, I just don't. Like I said, all deer head forms are all foam. You have a foam mannequin inside, and then a tan skin, and as like with animals, there's two different ways. This is a commercially tan raccoon, where I'll pass it around, where it's just like a fur coat. And other deer head, other taxidermists will get them commercially tanned, or they may get wet tan, which means they stay wet the whole time. Now, what you would do with this is you would rehydrate this, soak this, and then you'd stretch it some, and then this would go over a mannequin with horns, and that's not this coon. I'm talking about a deer with horns, and it gets glued down and eyes, and that's very simplistic, but the deer head taxidermy today is just phenomenal. They do reproduction noses, the septums, the nictitating membranes in the eye. There is the competition on whitetails. It's just unbelievable, a good whitetail taxidermist, what they'll do nowadays. But here, you can pass that around. Or they do what they call a dry preserve, where they're skinning. There again, you're skinning everything. You're not gutting anything. You're separating the meat from the skin. When I skin a bird, I'm taking the whole carcass out. So you're not gutting anything. And so when you're taking the whole thing out, it's just like obviously a chicken. It looks like it's just a body. But you can't have any meat in that bird whatsoever. You can't. I use the leg bones, wing bones, but all the meat has to be out of the bird. All that has to, because it will spoil. And then what you're doing is going back to deer heads. So that is then fleshed. The skin is fleshed, and then they might use a dry preservative, which basically it's like a home tan. There's pickling they can do too. They pickle skins. I don't know too many people who do that. And then it's glued. Now they have epoxy glues and stuff over the mannequin, and then it's sewed up. There's a lot of sewing in taxidermy. People have no idea how much sewing. I had a good grandmother that used to quilt all the time, and she did so much quilting, and I learned a lot of sewing from my grandmother, because I used to just practice sewing all day. I don't know. That's what I did with grandma. I sewed, and it really came in handy later in life. So. And I sew a lot on birds. I sew a lot also. But deer heads, Terry's Taxidermy up in Gulf Hammock, and Audra. In fact, it's a full. All the people that work at her shop, it's a woman. It's a full woman's taxidermy shop. No men work in this taxidermy shop whatsoever. And she used to do all the stuff for Ross Hammock out there. She used to do all their stuff. She no longer does that, but they do very good taxidermy. Her daughter mounted that bobcat for me. That was a roadkill. It was hit by a car 20-some years, about 1998, I think. I picked it off the road when I was a deputy sheriff, and then I skinned it, but it was in the freezer for 20-some years. And she mounted it for me, and actually that cat in 2019, she put in a competition. She got the best small mammal in the state of Florida. And so she's very, and she does fabulous whitetails. So I'll send business, I refer people to different people, Yes, sir.
So once in the freezer, you can just hold on to it as long as you want?
It depends. That was skinned, yes. What you're guarding against is freezer burn. You don't want something freezer burn. And some things hold up real well, some fish generally, but you want things wet. And I was talking about this later, but I'll talk about it now. Like on a bird, you want that, you wet it down and you seal it up just like you would a steak. Don't use pantyhose, don't put any paper, no newspaper, because it pulls the moisture out of the item. And then it gets freezer burnt, which is dried out. You want it to stay moist. I've had birds. Well, this is a dead mount brant that I killed in 1999, and it was in the freezer for 24 years. I'm not joking you. And what happens is I was going to throw it away, and I decided, let me process it. So I processed it, but what does happen is the fat under the skin gets crystallized, gets dehydrated. And then what happens is you get calix in the feathers, just like you get a calic in your hair, and it just doesn't fluff up very nice. And then I made a dead mount out of it to salvage it, because I actually killed this back in 1999 up in the Carolinas. And it's the only brand I ever killed, and it's a shame, but taxidermists are like mechanics or painters. They're always busy working on somebody else's stuff. Their house needs painting all the time. So, in fact, that's why I can't quit duck hunting. I would kill ducks and I would never get around to doing them for myself, and then other than for me, a competition or something. So I just don't duck hunt much anymore. But yes, they'll stay a long time. Fish will stay a long time. Deer heads, if they're not skinned out, the ears will get freezer burnt. And you keep everything in plastic. You want it sealed up in plastic, get the air out, and they'll stay a long time. They really do. If they're skinned and wet, frozen, processed and wet, they'll stay a really long time. But I don't recommend. A lot of people today throw that one guy. Not to complain about him, but that one guy, he'll go to Alaska, he'll go here, and then he puts them in Walmart bags. I'm like, just seal them up. My gosh, you spent all this money, and the thing is already getting freezer burnt. How hard is it? Just seal them up. Get a big Ziploc and get the air out and seal them up. But light can make them, too much light is bad on them. Too much change in humidity. You want them to have a nice constant temperature. People put stuff out on a porch or something in Florida. It's just, but it happens. Unless it's a fiberglass fish, but it should last a very long time. Museums, depends what they preserved them with. A lot of my deer heads look a lot that are really old. They get really light in color. You can clean a little bit of stuff, but it really depends how you take care of it, and it depends who mounted it. Unless bugs, you're always worried about bugs, especially in Florida. Bugs can get into stuff. And you get these horn boring, like in goats and different things, they'll bore in there. And sometimes you'll get carpet beetles on hair, and the hair will fall out, stuff like that. But stuff will, it stays a long time if you take proper care of it. I love cubes for ducks because they keep the dust off stuff. And in my display, I had them big, antique shop. And it was cheaper to buy, because a cube might run you $200, $250 or something. And I bought them big oak ones, and I paid like $450, $500, and I can put all kinds of birds in there. It keeps them protected, But a lot of my stuff is in my shop very old, because I just don't ever have time to mount stuff for myself. But getting back to, all right, well, that covers game heads, unless anybody has any other questions about deer heads and stuff like that. Like I said, I just refer people when they, I'll talk about CDW, and I'm not going to you can refer to FWC website, but it's a big deal right now in the state of Florida. It's chronic, I just got an article on here, it's chronic wasting disease. That's it. In a lot of states, it's a really big problem in certain states out west, up north. So now you can't, it's in the spinal fluid and in the brain, and to bring deer in from other states, it's a no-no. They have check stations. They have to be properly processed. It's, like I said, I don't take deer in, thank gosh. Check with FWC. I actually pulled this article. This article was in a magazine of mine, and they just increased the funding. It's not in Florida currently. There's a map on here. I'll pass this around. There's a map of where it is. Fortunately, we don't have it in Florida right now. I guess it's never been proven that it hurts humans at this point if you ate the meat, but they certainly don't want this chronic waste disease to get into cattle and all the other agricultural stuff. Here, I'll just pass it around. But it certainly... It has hindered taxidermists, certainly from other states, because people they end up getting the stuff mounted in that state. It has to stay in that state, or it has to be processed right. So there again, I'm going to refer to FWC website and talk to them. It's the same like with salvage permits. If you pick up a fox on the road, you can't kill a fox in Florida. fox squirrels, all that. They do have salvage permits. I don't know the details of that anymore. It used to be 25 bucks. I don't know. Just refer to the website. And I'll talk about a little bit more of the ethics and stuff a little later. But let's move on with fish. I'll do a few fish. I like to compete with fish. This bass, I competed with this bass a couple years ago. This is a skin mount, and it is finished out on both sides, which is very challenging. That has a foam mannequin in there. That's a skin mount, which everything is real in that fish except his eye. Everything is real. I'll do skin mounts. Very few people do skin mounts anymore. I do about a batch a year of some fish. I get suckered into doing 4 or 5 fish a year. And I don't mind doing fish. I just don't have time to do them. What everybody, reproductions or what happens now, this is a smallmouth bass reproduction. They're made out of fiberglass generally. It's like working on a boat or a car or something. I mean, it's a whole different thing of taxidermy. You know, you got in Florida we have big reproduction guys. We have Gray's Taxidermy down south. If you go on a charter boat, most saltwater fish are going to be reproductions because of the oil and the grease in the cartilage. So when you go, they take measurements and then they paint them up. You attach your fins. It's a lot of work. I try to stay away from reproductions. I'll do a few a year, but they're so expensive now. I'll charge $450 or so to do a skin mount on a bass. This thing will cost me just to get it $450. So to charge, to do all the work and paint it and all the stuff you got to do, maybe I'll charge $700 or something. It's a lot of money for a fish. So, yes, sir.
What's the process of producing
A skin mount?
skin off of a fish?
Well, what you do is you make an incision, and there again, you're separating the skin from the meat. And then you got to clean all the stuff out inside the head, and then you scrape it down, you get all the meat off of it and around the fins, and then what you're going to do is make up a pickle that there again, it's pulling all whatever oils and grease. It has borax in it, maybe a little alcohol, a little vinegar, and you're letting that you let that soak overnight, and then you come back with mache around your fins, and then you're going to put, I didn't bring one, but a mannequin, a foam mannequin inside, and you'll staple up the back. Usually, it's not gonna, to do one for a competition, you got to have it all fit perfectly. You might even carve your own body out of foam, and then once you put it all together and do all your fins, you're going to let it dry, and then it all dries, and then you'll have shrinkage. Did it lock up?
Not locked, just resting.
Resting. It's resting. So I've done them and there again, you can even, in olden days, I used mache and Excelsior, which I use in birds still. I'm old school. I still do things a lot the old way. And Excelsior, a lot of your old fish will have Excelsior in it, which is a wood wool product. And I actually this is what I use to make my own bodies on birds, other than turkeys. I just brought these duck bodies. Let me pass these around. I mean, they're all different. Taxidermy, believe it or not, is a supplier's world, meaning how you make a lot of money in taxidermy is you sell supplies. That's how you make a lot of money. And what in the old days, you go compete on, let's say you won on ducks. Well, then I would develop my own duck bodies to sell my own brand of duck bodies. And that's how people make money in taxidermy. It's not doing the taxidermy, even there are some successful taxidermists. And I feel like I'm sort of one of them. I've earned my living for, 18 years. I earn my living with it, but it's not like what you think. You got to do a lot of work because business expense. But here, you can pass this around. And these are 2 versions of duck bodies. You can see all the muscular, honestly, on a duck, you're not going to see the muscles and you're not going to see that. It's kind of like fishing tackle. You buy lures, the fishermen they're the ones that attract the fish. You know what I'm saying? The lure. But this is what they call wood wool or packing material. I have enough of this to last me the rest of my life. I feel I have bales of it, and I'll pass it around too if you want to see it. But I make my own bird bodies, And that's basically what's inside a duck that I do, not the foam. What you do, and I brought this for example, this is like I said, dead mount, but I brought example. So what you would do on a bird is you're gonna make an incision from here to here, and then I use a real skull too. That's another thing you can do, reproduction bills. I can do them, I just don't do them commercially. I'll do them for a competition. But then I'll make another incision on here. So you're separating the skin and from the meat. And then, so on the skin, it's just like if you think of yourself, the feathers have quills and they're attached in the skin. Then on the underside, you have fat, okay? I have wire wheels that I use, and I sit there after all this and all the meat is taken out, like all the extremities, the head, the wings. You know, this will be totally inverted, or it'll be cut and all that meat will be cleaned out. All the meat's out of that, you just have your skin. I'll wheel the skin. And what that does, that wheel will take all the fat off of separating all the fat out of the bird.
So it's all manual then?
It's all these two hands. Everything is these two hands. And then after that, I take it and I wash it. I wash the bird skin. Everything's very pliable. And you wash it in Dawn dishwashing detergent, a little Tide. And then after that, I'm gonna take the bird skin, it's all wet, and I'm going to take it, and I have a tumbler. And I should have brought some photos of this stuff, but a tumbler is, here, let's get the slideshow going again. I think it'll work. A tumbler, and in the tumbler, you've seen like people use for making, what's this, it's just a barrel, basically a barrel that tumbles, and inside is hardwood sawdust. And hardwood sawdust pulls the moisture out of the feathers. And then I take the air hose, if you ever go by and hear the air hose going, I'm taking the air hose, blowing all that sawdust out of there. And then I take a hair dryer, and I use the hair dryer to get all the feathers back nice and dry. And then, but you want the skin moist, but there's nothing there, and the birds smell fine, you know what I'm saying? And then you're taking that, you're putting this mannequin in, well then I preserve the skin. The preserving of a skin on a duck is, you're basically bug proofing it. And the preservative that I use, it's made up of borax, like mule team borax you buy in the grocery store. It's a bug proofer. It's borax, and it probably has a little boric acid, probably a little mothballs in it. I take that, you're gonna douse the skin down with that. I'll use clay and stuff for the head, and then you use wires. So this is gonna then go into the bird. And you're wrapping the skin around, and you're putting all the wires in, putting all the wires in to hold everything, and then you're sewing everything back up. So everything's pliable. Everything's pliable and flexible, and then you get all the preservative out of it. You're hitting it with a hair dryer. It's all, and then you're gonna, whatever position you're gonna put it into. And some of these photos you see, they're all carded up or have string around them. So then everything after you get into position, then you do all the feather placement. And and the drier you get a bird, the more the feathers will lay nice for you. So you sit there with the tweezers and you put all those feathers back in place. Okay, and everybody says it's so tedious, and it is, but it's not as tedious as one might think. It's physically hard work because you're doing this all day, and like I said, it's a lot of sewing. And then once everything is in a position, then you just let it dry, and you might monitor, come back and move things around a little bit, that sort of thing. But as it dries, so what's happening is the moisture is being pulled out of it naturally. And once it dries, then the feathers get locked down. Everything gets locked down. So you have nothing to smell bad. It's just feathers, and there's no meat. And then that borax, that preservative is in there. And then that's all you're doing really on ducks is bug proofing. Yes, sir?
How many hours average for a duck?
Probably about 10. I put about 10 hours into a duck. 8 to 10, because then after it dries, then you come back, take all the cards off, all that, you seal everything. Now this duck didn't, this Brant didn't have a lot. But then I come back and everything fades. And well, like this turkey head here, everything fades. This is a freeze-dried turkey head, and I'll talk a little bit about freeze-dry. But that's a turkey head. Everything fades, so then I come back and I airbrush everything. So on a duck, this bill, all all this is airbrushed. And then around his eye, I had to rebuild that with a putty, like a putty material, and rebuild the membrane around the eye. And that's the tedious part. Me airbrushing and finishing, because I'm very particular, and it takes a long time. Because on the turkey heads, I send these off to a guy in Georgia. This is the real turkey head. This is a reproduction turkey head, which was a cast. Okay? Now, real turkey heads, this one doesn't have, but usually they have all the hair. It's your turkey head. So I send them off. They actually skin them out all the way, and then they fill foam in there. This kind of pops out. I don't have this, there's a screw in there right now. And then they go into a freeze-dry machine, just like freeze-dried flowers, freeze-dried coffee, freeze-dried. What it does, it's kind of like being in space. It's a vacuum space freezer that they freeze it in place in a freezer. Then they put it into this machine, and it stays like 3 months, 4 months, which basically is like freezer burning it. Then you don't have any shrinkles of all these wattles, carnicles, all this stuff. And then after that, he sends them back to me. It costs me about $100 to have done. And I got to ship them up there or drive them up there or whatever. And here, pass that around. So everything is in taxidermy, even deer heads, you got to paint everything. I didn't bring well, obviously on this, but even a skin mount, that whole fish is painted. It looks like that color there. It's just dull. So that's where the finishing gets. So on a bird, it's a matter of you got all this processing you have to do. Well, you don't want to damage. You don't want to lose scales on like a fish. Okay, I'm talking about fish. You don't want to lose scales on a fish. So that's going to be a skin mount. You know, if you're doing a reproduction, that's catch and release, right? You're going to measure it and you're going to release it. You can take a picture of it because they vary, all fish vary. And going back to the reproduction fish, most of your saltwater fish are going to be reproductions due to grease and stuff. But I've done redfish. I did this, I don't have a picture. I've done some really funky fish skin mounts. It turned out quite well. You'll have a lot of shrinkage if they have a lot of cartilage and stuff. Obviously, like catfish, sharks, all that stuff's going to be reproductions because the skin, I'm not saying people have never done it. They've done it, but you have a lot of shrink. It's too much work and a lot of grease. But yeah, you're going to take it, and on fish you can take a super wet towel, and then take a towel, wrap the fish in a towel, and then put it in a plastic bag, a garbage bag, and then freeze it. You're freezing everything. On a deer head, you're going to put it in a garbage bag and then get it to the taxidermist and freeze it. Freezing deer heads are good because a lot of times they have a lot of ticks on them and stuff, and it kills all the ticks and all that stuff. On birds, the same way. You know, Ziploc bags, you want to just, I'd say, wet it down with cold water, stick it in a sealed bag, and and then seal it up, and it'll be good for a very long time. The other thing I was going to say about reproductions. A lot of things now are casted. That snake over there, that's just foam. That's not even a real snake. That's just a reproduction of a snake. And then I painted it, and I painted it. And if you didn't do that on a snake, I don't do snakes anymore. I haven't done a snake in 30 years. I just brought it for this. You're gonna skin a snake out just like you'd skin anything else out, and then you're gonna put the skin over a mannequin. I mean, I'm really simplifying it, but it's more to it than that. Because when you do a snake, they stretch like crazy, and there's a lot to it. If you ever want to do a snake skin, just to preserve a snake skin, you can you skin a snake, and then you got to get that flesh off with an old silver spoon or something, tack it out on a board, and then take antifreeze. Antifreeze is it has a lot of glycerin in it. Just paint with the skin side down, the scale side down. Put antifreeze, put coats of antifreeze on it after you tack it out, and that'll be pretty limber. You know, it's not tan per se, but you could then glue it down to felt or something. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of paint are you using, and then the final sealant over the paint?
Well, first I use like a fungal sealer first. Actually, you're gonna wipe. I use lacquer paints. You can use acrylics. But I use lacquer because it's easier to airbrush lacquer, and it dries so fast, and I've used it for so long. So you're gonna seal it with a lacquer sealer, and then you're gonna come back with your airbrush, and then two different things. I put like another sealer coat or a little wet gloss over top to seal it in, or you could use like Mod Podge, a satin Mod Podge for competition birds. I take watered down Mod Podge and seal, and all you're doing is you don't want the paint to chip, so you're going to seal in that paint so it doesn't chip. On a fish, I use lacquer paints, but then the gloss is a two-part epoxy gloss, just like a DuPont product that would do in a car. If you're gonna gloss your car, that's how they do cars. It's an epoxy product now, which is very expensive. Which honestly, that's another reason I don't do a lot of fish, is because every time I do fish, I got to go get new hardener, because the hardener doesn't last very long, and that's like $50. So it's like it's like anything else. If you do a lot of them, it's fine. If you don't do much, your profit margin starts going down the toilet a little bit for doing work. So it's whatever you get set up to do. So yeah, nowadays a lot of things are reproductions, and it's fine. You know, heck, you can get dinosaurs now that are reproduction. You can buy like little dinosaurs. There's all kinds of, and you can make your own stuff. You can cast your own fish. You can make your own. You can make your own. I never got into casting a lot of stuff. Obviously, there's supply companies that you know that they make these things, and they're expensive, and it's a two-part fiberglass mold. This is where the seams were, and you know they pop them out. There's rubber molds now in reproductions of things. But I'm pretty much old school. I make my own bodies. It's cheaper. This material here it's just a foam product. I think they use it primarily for when they pour concrete and their separation joints in concrete. That's what that stuff is. And I actually try to get away from using, you get so dependent on supply companies, then supply companies go out of business. If you can buy everything at Walmart, that works a lot better, you know. But use a lot of Bondo, generally speaking. I don't, but like in a deer ear, it might be Bondo or an ear liner. What else? Oh, I want to talk about licensing and stuff like that. To mount birds, to mount migratory waterfowl, like I said, you can't sell them. I have a federal permit. You got to get it from the Fish and Wildlife Service. And what that does is it allows me to possess your bird. With that sense, the other thing I want to talk about is the permits are good for 3 years. It used to be free. Now they charge you about $100, of course. And the possession-wise is, as of, you get a lot of calls for dead owls, dead songbirds that hit a window, all this stuff. I can only mount, let's put it this way, if you can legally shoot it, okay, you can legally possess it. It's pretty much that simple. Your hunting license gives you the right to possess that bird. My federal permit allows me to temporarily possess your bird for you for taxidermy purposes. I got to log them in when they come in the door, and I log them when they go out the door. That's what it really gives me. Now, can you mount hawks, owls, all that stuff? Yes, you can, but not you personally. In fact, for when I did it full time at another taxidermy shop, 3 months out of the year, that's all I did was for like Wilderness Graphics out of Tallahassee. They'd go build a refuge system or a visitor center. I've done loons, eagle. I did a pair of fighting bald eagles in midair for the South Carolina Visitor Center. I do stuff for Kings Bay Naval Station. I've done a penguin for SeaWorld. I've done a Payne's Prairie. I've done stuff that they would build the dioramas and then they sub out the taxidermy. I've done shorebirds, songbirds, hummingbirds, warblers, pelicans. I did a pelican for the Naval Submarine Base up there in Georgia. I spent 3 months a year doing nothing but that stuff. And I really haven't gone back to doing that stuff because I really haven't let them people know I even do this much anymore. And it's not bad. I stay busy enough with what I'm doing. I've done a flamingo. I've done, my gosh, lots of hawks. And I've done probably about 8 or 9 eagles, bald eagles that were, obviously found dead on the road or whatever. But it has to be for an institution. You cannot personally, since 1968, since the Lacey Act, you cannot personally own any of these things. You can't own a songbird. You can't own a blue jay. If you find something dead on the road, it's illegal, basically 5 years in prison for you to keep that hawk or owl or I don't know how much the fine is. You can't possess a feather thereof unless you're like a native Indian. Same with, I say ducks. I can't sell you a wood duck. I can't sell you this feather to tie flies with legally. I could use it for myself to tie a fly, but I can't sell it.
So if you find a leg from a bird with big
Talons or something, right. You cannot possess that legally. But you can get permits. Now, I say you, not you, but an institution. And it has to be a place like this place. It has to be, I did stuff for like the bicycle club in Gainesville, cycling club, because why? They had their own clubhouse. It wasn't going into somebody's house. Okay, so it's not, I don't think it's too, some places like Payne's Prairie, and who pays for that? Well, it was just like this place. Friends of Payne's Prairie would pay for the taxidermy to get done for the exhibits that they had. And so you can do it, but you can't personally own this stuff. And there's a reason why. Mostly it's easier to enforce. If you make exceptions, it gets real hard to enforce it. And then you have people that go out here and kill something because they want an owl mounted in their house and all that. So obviously I can't say I have people bringing stuff in. I get phone calls. Hey, I found a dead owl on the road. Will you mount it for me? No, I can't do that. You could donate it. But honestly, like museums and stuff, they really don't even, the best thing to do is bury it. You know, a lot of places have enough stuff. Yes, sir.
Tell us about doing a hummingbird. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I did a hummingbird. I've done a couple of them. It's just really small. Obviously, it's a ruby-throated hummingbird. We only have about one. Yeah, they're just. I mean, there again, you're gonna skin it. Now, some people freeze dry stuff. You know, like I said, that turkey head's freeze dried. Some people would freeze dry certain things like that, but no, I conventionally mounted it. A lot of songbirds are tough to do, and especially because a lot of them are accidentally killed. You know, they're not going to go kill these things for these exhibits. Yeah, I mean, I've done ostriches. Now you can kill ostriches in Africa. There again, you can't sell birds that are native to North America, but I could sell you a bird that's native to Africa. Okay, I could sell you a mandarin duck that there's none in, they're not native to North America, but they're native, if it came from captivity, something that's not in North America. I could sell you a rooster, that sort of thing. So, there are some things that, and then again, if you can do that, you can possess them. You see what I'm saying? You go to Africa, you kill something. Of course, you got to go through customs and all the stuff to bring them into our country, the legalities. But there again, I would refer you to FWC website or the Fish and Wildlife. You don't want to be ever in violation of any Fish and Wildlife violations. Yes, sir.
What do you do with all the waste products as far as the meat and the bones and things like that?
Right. Well, either two things, you're supposed to bury it or you're supposed to burn it. And I bury them. I just bury it. Turkeys, honestly, if you bring a fresh turkey, like I have to skin a turkey that comes in because I don't have enough freezer space. So I skin them, and actually, I did one yesterday. The guy brought it in fresh. He killed it yesterday morning, and I peeled it out for him. He took his carcass home, or you take the breast and you get the breast meat. And if it's fresh, because I got to skin them anyway, and if I have time to do it. And sometimes I've kept the breast meat to eat. They're pretty good, but if it's fresh, I don't do if it's not fresh. I think it was 1968, I believe, or 72 was the Lacey Act, and everything prior. So some people say, oh yeah, I've had this old horned owl that, is shot in 1945, and it was my grandfather's and handed down. Yeah, you can legally have that. Now, do you have any documentation to it? No. Are you going to go to jail for it? No, you shouldn't go to jail for it. But I mean, it's just one of those. You see stuff on eBay for sale or estate sale, they'll sell a duck because they don't know, but legally they can't unless it's a hatchery bird. People pen-raised wood ducks. They raise, and they should have documentation or a hind toe. The toe back here in the back should be clipped. But people don't know. It's not. as a taxidermist, I'm not, when you come in, you fill out this tag on migratory birds, and you fill all this out, where it was killed, the species, the number of, like if it's 1 or 2, that sort of thing, date collected, and you sign it. To me, that's your affidavit, that everything is legal, you're saying it's legal. I don't know, when you went to Arkansas, I don't know the duck hunting seasons in Arkansas. I'm not law enforcement no more, even if you do whatever you're gonna do. But of course, if you brought something in fresh, you shot a duck in March, and you said, I shot it here out in the Gulf, and obviously I'm gonna say you need to go somewhere else, But, so this is their affidavit. Now this year, they've changed on deer heads, on deer, FWC made, you have to call it in and get a confirmation number now. When you go deer hunting in the state of Florida, they give you a number. I guess there's a short survey. Well, this year they did the turkeys that way. So now, and I didn't know this till like 2 weeks ago, but of course the season just started. I'm collecting the confirmation numbers because they're saying that we should do that. And so it's getting, and I guess they're doing it for survey. FWC wants to know the number that are killed and that sort of thing. So I collect that number, but I don't collect your license number. I don't do any of that. But obviously anything, don't bring me anything illegal. I don't want to deal with it. Because there again, if you can't possess it illegal, I'm not going to be able to legally possess it. And it's not worth my, shop. And a lot of taxidermists do get in a lot of trouble. They get in a lot of trouble. If they're intentionally doing it, but there's a lot of record keeping, like I said, I got to log you in, log you out, keep track of stuff, and it gets involved, but it's just part of it, So yes, yeah. Well, it really, a lot of us, I believe mostly taxidermy has been around for back in Egypt would do things. Back in Egypt, they did things back then. I think the modern taxidermist basically a lot from England. And you had, obviously in America, it was really big. If you ever been to New York City, to the Museum of Natural History, I love going there. Carl Akeley was a big, he's one of our, we give a Carl Akeley Award on the national level. Back in the early 1800, a big of collection of specimens and that sort of thing. Of course, taxidermy in those places, they do a lot of study skins. They have drawers and drawers of birds and study skins for any ornithologist can study. Arsenic used to be really highly used in taxidermy. So if you think about anything that's bad for bugs isn't good for you either. Okay, arsenic has probably killed a lot of taxidermists, which it killed a lot of bugs, but back then that's what they did. It was arsenic. We don't use arsenic anymore. I don't know all the in that coonskin that was commercially tanned. Tanning is a matter of shaving. They shave the skin, and then it's a matter of tumbling, and it's oiled. And Indians used to do stuff, obviously for tanning and everything. They would use like the brain tanning. The chemicals in a brain would do a tan. There's a lot of books on it. I just read a book this past year. I'm trying to think of the name of it, and it's very well done. It was actually by a woman that just got into taxidermy. She had no concept of taxidermy and got into the whole fascination. I mean, it's one of the things, either you love it or you kind of hate it, and I always look at it as, when I was a young child, I look at the beauty of things, and you look what God created. And what you're trying to it's just the beauty of the detail of the movement, and you're trying to recreate that. And that's why I still compete. You still compete with things it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it's amazing. In fact, the stuff now in competition is so realistic. If you took a live bird in there or a live animal and someone judged it, they'd probably knock all these points off. It's really ridiculous. But it's been around, it's been around a very, very long time. It was a big push in the 20s and 30s with a lot of the expeditions they would put on just to collect specimens for the museums and stuff like that. Those things are a little bit gone. Smithsonian, I was in the Smithsonian a couple of years ago, and there's not that much taxidermy. The hull of birds was very discouraging to me down in the basement. It's like they kind of hid it away and stuff, and now holograms are getting to be a bigger thing, where it's just a hologram of something. But I knew a taxidermist that did a giant woolly mammoth, a lot of recreation stuff, and he built a building for it. And it was basically, he took this big African thing and he made this giant mammoth. They make bald eagles now out of chicken feathers. They've been doing that for many, many years. They're all reproductions, but it's all poultry feathers, and they look fabulous. When I worked in a big taxidermy shop, I painted everything. I didn't mount. If you want to know mounted wise, probably bird wise, I do an ostrich shoulder mount of an ostrich. That's pretty for a bird. Swans, I'll do swans now. You can kill them in certain states. A swan is one of the biggest birds I'll do on maybe one a year. I just did one that went to Texas. But we used to do, when you get into African stuff, people, or different North American, brown bears, I've worked on them, but I didn't mount them, okay? It's amazing. There's some taxidermists, it's amazing the work they do of just action poses of leopards and all kinds of stuff, eating a gazelle and chasing stuff. The only thing I've done recently that's kind of cool, I'm doing I did a guinea. I haven't done a guinea in a while. I did a guinea that's running like heck. And it's running because Audra, the girl, she's mounting a bobcat that's going to be right on its tail and full, like right there. So I'm just doing that guinea part of it for her. Interesting fact, one like a rooster, the chickens, I don't do a lot of chickens. And I'll tell you a real quick story on a chicken. I had when I was finishing him up for the competition, I got a call on the phone, and this elderly couple, and they said, "We're on the way to see you." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "We're in Homosassa, but we're coming from Tampa." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what can I do for you?" And they were kind of crying a little bit and that sort of thing. And I'm like, "Well, what do you?" That scared me, because I don't want to refuse you. But they came up, and here they had a chicken, and their chicken, they called it Lady. And they had this chicken for 18 years, and it lived with them. It lives in their house with them. And they had this chick, it goes on trips with them in their RV. And it was nuts. And she says, "Yeah, this morning we walked out, it flew out of the house, and it would watch TV with them." It's thinking it was a dog. And she brought it in, and it was on a ladder outside the house, and walked out, and there it was dead. And it was 18 years old. And what can I say to these people? I'm going to do it for them. And I just hope I do it that before one of them dies, actually, to be honest with you. Because I've had customers die on me. Because right now, I try to stay under a year. When you bring me something, I try to get it back to you within a year. And that's I used to be longer than that. And a lot of taxidermists, that's why a lot of people don't take in work anymore, because they're 2 years, 3 years behind. The quality of their taxidermies is pretty. If you go into Gainesville Bass Pro Shop and really look at that stuff, they have got a lot of cool stuff in there. Bass Pro Shop used to get everything donated to them, and their quality of the taxidermy was really rough, I thought. Then they joined with Cabela's. You ever been to a Cabela's where the mountain's in the center of the place? They would then sub out the taxidermy. I don't know who they all use for taxidermists. I don't know. I had a duck one time at Gander Mountain for a little while, and then I pulled it out of there. And I don't really, it's also interesting with taxidermy is, you get a big fish and it's, who caught the fish? Who killed the deer? It's never who mounted it. You know what I mean? It's just like that. It's just who mounted this thing? This year, I'll tell you, on ducks, I was really surprised that a lot of duck customers I got were all brand new young guys duck hunting. For some reason, they really got into it this year. It was kind of nice to see. It was, it's nice to see. Hunting and fishing, and I always say, and probably the FWC, I would think, would say the same thing. If you want to save a species, you hunt or fish for it. And all the money that goes for it. And then the great thing about that is, look at our redfish, look at our wild turkey successes, look at ducks unlimited, all that. What do you do in the process? You're saving habitat. It's the habitat loss that's killing our animals. They got to live somewhere. So in the process of, saving turkeys and their habitats, you're saving all the songbirds, you're saving all the other creatures that live there. And and it's a shame when you don't hunt something, then it doesn't get the money to support the survival of that species. And so it's through conservation. It's not like it was, many migratory waterfowl laws come from the, thinking back to the bad things about hunting, where they, the wood ducks at one time were really decimated. Waterfowl due to the market hunting, of over hunting, and you hear all that negative stuff. Well, those days, if you can, conservation is managing the wildlife that we have. Taxidermy, like I said, is just icing on the cake of that trip. That's really what I think it is. Some people either love it, they hate it. I don't know. I just, I find I got into it because it was fascinating to me. And I'm still fascinated by it, even as I've been doing it a long time. I'm there pretty much Monday through Friday, some Saturdays. If my sign on the door says open, I'm there. Just come on and look around. There's, sometimes I have a lot of birds, sometimes I don't. It just depends what I'm working. Right now I'm doing turkeys from last season, and I'm taking in new turkeys. I try not to take a lot of turkeys in, actually. I could take in a lot of turkeys, but I try not to, because they just get involved. In fact, when I was part-time, I tried not to take in hardly any birds because I hate saying no to people. And a lot of bird taxidermists now, they'll take in maybe 40 birds a year if they're part-time, and they say that's it. Or you'll find I don't have a website. I'm not on Instagram. I'm really hard to get a hold of, not in a sense if you know my number, but that's because I don't want to say no to you. You know what I'm saying? And then people get mad, but you can only do so much. You can only do so much. Yes, sir.
Do you have any apprentices? You got any little 16-year-old kids?
No. Well, right now I've got one. She's been helping me out. She's been helping me out, like tear some birds down. She can sew, so I use her to sew right now. And then she cleans the shop periodically. That's been a help. Because up till now, it's pretty much I've been doing everything myself. The other issue is, you got to have money to pay people. And that's always a struggle. Cash flow is always a struggle. Like I said, business expenses are what they are. But I've had a couple college students come in, they get into, and a lot of people, they get fascinated with it, but then they find out that this is a lot of work and there's more to it than what people think. I've tried over the years to train somebody, and then it just doesn't, you put all this work into them and then they just kind of do their own thing, or they don't want to do it no more, and it's fine. But there are schools, there are people out here, you could go, like for birds, you can go to the different guys, they do it for, like $3,000 for a weekend and stuff like that, and charge a lot of money. But anyway, if you have any more questions, I'm down there at 363rd Street. I'm right across from Town Hall. If my sign's open, you come by and visit me, and I'll answer any other questions that you have. But thank you very much.